I ultimately engineered a situation that would hopefully see a vindictive, fraudulent HOA president lose her entire career. And it all started with a simple dinner with friends who had been some of her primary victims. For those who missed the first part of this saga, it ended with me revealing to an entire neighborhood that their iron-fisted homeowners association was, in fact, completely fake. It had never been legally formed. The woman running it all, a real estate agent we'll call Ms. Albright, was nothing more than a con artist. That revelation kicked over a hornet's nest. But I didn't know the half of it until my wife and I sat down for that dinner. Our friends, who had been targeted and harassed by Ms. Albright for years, finally filled us in on the aftermath of the letters I sent out. I learned that a massive lawsuit had been filed. And, to my surprise, it had already been settled. Ms. Albright, it turns out, got herself a very, very good lawyer. The settlement details were mostly secret under a strict non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. But our friends confirmed they had been made whole, meaning they got their money back. But the story of how Ms. Albright pulled this off for so long is a masterclass in manipulation. It all began back in 2000. When the subdivision was first built. Ms. Albright was the very first person to buy a house there. The developer had apparently intended to set up a proper, legal HOA. But for various reasons, they never finalized it. This was the tiny crack of opportunity Ms. Albright needed. This reveals Ms. Albright's core belief that confidence is a substitute for legitimacy. A fatal flaw that would ultimately lead to her undoing. As the next few families moved in, she approached them with a warm smile and a friendly pitch. "Hi. Welcome to the neighborhood. We are setting up a voluntary neighborhood association, just to take care of the common areas and keep property values up." It sounded reasonable. And the first 5 or 6 homeowners agreed. But once she had that initial buy-in, her story changed. For every new family after that, the pitch became much more assertive. It was no longer a neighborhood association, but a direct, "Hey. Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm the president of the HOA. Nice to meet you." Most people just went along with it. Back then, nearly every new subdivision had an HOA. So they assumed they'd missed a detail in their closing paperwork. A few people did pay closer attention and called her on it. When challenged, she'd pivot back seamlessly. "Well, it's not really a formal HOA." She'd concede. "It's more a voluntary neighborhood association. But we do have some rules we've all agreed to. And we collect a small fee, just $25 a month, to maintain the common areas and protect our property values." She even wrote these rules herself and called them CC and RS. Arguing the name gave them legal weight. And it worked. Everyone signed on, either believing it was a real HOA or a binding neighborhood association. By the time the lawsuit was filed, the number of residents who thought the HOA was legitimate outnumbered those who knew it was voluntary by about 4 to 1. This is where her lawyer proved his worth. During the lawsuit, he successfully argued to the judge that only the people who signed up under the impression of a legitimate HOA had actually been defrauded. The ones who agreed to a voluntary neighborhood association, he claimed, had entered the agreement willingly and were not entitled to any part of the settlement. Ms. Albright and her lawyer celebrated this as a clever victory, completely unaware that in excluding these people, they had just created a group of witnesses with no legal obligation to remain silent. The people who were cut out of the deal were, as you can imagine, absolutely furious. The financial blow to Ms. Albright was still significant. She had to refinance her home to pull out enough equity to pay back the members of the official settlement. All that money she'd built up over a decade was gone. Paid back to the people she scammed. To make matters worse, her husband, who I guess was not in on the scheme, filed for an acrimonious divorce right in the middle of the lawsuit. Our friends told us they often heard shouting matches coming from her house during their evening walks. Now, for the revenge. My friends had gone to the district attorney's office to pursue criminal charges. But the DA's office told them that the statute of limitations for that type of felony fraud was only 3 years. And it had already passed. It was infuriating. I wasn't the only one who thought so. As one online commenter later put it, I really can't believe what a coward that DA is. The statute of limitations clock starts when the crime is done being committed. If the not president of the not HOA was still cashing checks up until a few months ago, she was still in the process of committing felony mail fraud. That kind of lazy bullshit is why people lose faith in the justice system. The criminal route was a dead end. But I had another idea. I suggested they report her to the IRS. After all, who knows if she ever paid taxes on all those dues she collected? The gleeful look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. But here's where Ms. Albright's lawyer was almost too smart for his own good. One of the terms of the settlement's NDA was that the signers agreed not to report her to any professional boards or licensing agencies. She was clearly worried about losing her real estate license. It was a clever move. But she and her lawyer overlooked one critical detail. Too bad for her. I wasn't part of that settlement. I never lost any money. So I never signed any NDA. After my initial email to the state real estate agency, I got a response. I spent a good while on the phone with the head of the Professional Standards Division. He was very interested in my story. I gave a full, recorded statement, on the condition it would remain confidential. The last thing I needed was her trying to make my life a living hell. This is where it all came together. I learned at dinner that our friends were still in touch with several of the people who were excluded from the settlement, the ones who signed up for the voluntary association. The ones her lawyer argued weren't defrauded. Which meant they also weren't covered by that pesky little NDA. Before I even started writing this update, I was composing another email. I sent the names and contact information for 3 of those owners directly to the head of the Professional Standards Division. My testimony was one thing. But the testimony of actual financial victims? People who had been explicitly cut out of the deal and had no restrictions on what they could say. I imagine their words will carry a whole lot more weight. For their convenience, I also included the official state court case number for the lawsuit. As a state agency, maybe they can access the sealed records of the case and see the full, ugly truth for themselves. And that brings us to today. The wheels of a different kind of justice are now turning. And I, for one, can't wait to see where they lead. This whole saga is a testament to the fact that deception, no matter how carefully constructed, can be unraveled by a single, persistent loose thread. The truth eventually finds its way out. Especially when someone is there to help it along. So I'll ask you, if you found yourself in a similar situation, would you go to these lengths for justice? Or would you be content just to walk away once you were safe?